There's a specific moment when everything changes in how a woman sees you. It doesn't happen when your bank account drops, when you miss a workout, or when someone more successful walks into the room. It happens the second you start molding yourself into whatever shape you think will make her stay. That moment when you erase your own boundaries just to avoid being alone, that's when attraction dies quietly. You might not see it immediately. She might still respond to your messages, still laugh at your jokes, still show up when you call, but something fundamental has shifted underneath the surface. And once that shift happens, reversing it becomes nearly impossible. If you keep reading, you'll understand exactly why. The guys who seem unbothered always have women pursuing them, while nice, accommodating men get left wondering what went wrong. Here's something most people get completely wrong. They think getting someone's attention is the same as earning their admiration. Those are two entirely separate things. Getting noticed is simple. You can wear something flashy, say something funny, show up at the right time, or just exist when someone feels like having company. Attention flows easily and disappears just as fast. It's based on mood, circumstance, boredom, or curiosity. But deep respect, the kind that makes someone value your presence even when you're not trying, that's built through something much harder to fake. It comes from how you handle yourself when things get uncomfortable. And this is where so many guys completely sabotage themselves without realizing it. When you start rearranging your personality to avoid conflict or rejection, people notice. Not always consciously, but they feel it. You stop disagreeing because you're afraid she'll get upset. You respond instantly to every message because you think availability equals interest. You cancel your own plans the moment she hints at wanting your time. You avoid saying what you really think because honesty might create distance. Slowly, you become predictable in the worst possible way. Not predictable like a reliable partner, but predictable like someone who has no center, no backbone, no real identity beyond pleasing whoever is in front of them. That's when respect starts fading without a single argument or dramatic event. People admire strength that doesn't need to announce itself. Think about how you react when someone stays completely unfazed during a stressful situation. There's something magnetic about that composure. It makes you trust them more. It makes their words carry more weight. It creates this quiet authority that doesn't come from being loud or controlling, just from being solid. Now think about the opposite. Someone who panics the moment things don't go their way, who needs constant reassurance, who melts down over small inconveniences. That energy drains everyone around them. The same principle applies in relationships. A guy who can't handle being ignored for a few hours without spiraling shows emotional fragility. And fragility, when it's constant, kills attraction faster than almost anything else. You've probably seen this play out before. The guy who seems completely secure in himself naturally draws people in. He's not trying harder than everyone else. He's not performing or chasing validation. He just exists with this calm certainty that his value isn't up for debate. He doesn't freak out when plans change. He doesn't interrogate people about their feelings. He doesn't need hourly confirmation that he matters. And ironically, that independence makes people want to be around him more. Meanwhile, the guy who bends over backward trying to prove his worth ends up pushing people away with the very effort he thinks will keep them close. Because desperation smells like fear, and fear communicates that you don't truly believe you're enough on your own. Now, let's talk about what actually builds lasting admiration. It's not your job title, your car, your muscles, or your social media following. Those things might create initial attraction, but they don't sustain respect. You can have all the external success in the world and still be emotionally weak, and people will see through that. Real respect grows when someone watches how you protect your own peace, when they see you refuse to tolerate behavior that violates your values, when they realize you're not so terrified of being alone that you'll accept anything just to keep the connection alive. That willingness to walk away from what doesn't serve you, even when it hurts, that's what separates boys from men in the eyes of women. Standards aren't about being difficult or playing games. They're about knowing what you will and won't accept in your life. Most guys don't even realize they've abandoned their standards until they're months deep into a situation that's slowly destroying their confidence. It starts small. She cancels plans last minute and you say it's fine even though it bothered you. She talks to you disrespectfully and you laugh it off to avoid tension. She gives inconsistent effort and you convince yourself that patience will fix it. One compromise leads to another until you've trained her to believe that your boundaries don't actually mean anything. And once someone learns they can cross your lines without consequence, respect evaporates. Here's the painful truth that nobody wants to hear. Love does not require you to tolerate everything. Somewhere along the way, men got this idea that being endlessly patient and never standing firm makes them better partners. Like, suffering in silence is noble. It's not. It's self-destruction disguised as loyalty. Real strength is caring about someone while still refusing to betray yourself. It's being kind without being weak. It's staying compassionate while enforcing boundaries. The guys who understand this balance become impossible to forget because they're so rare. They don't stick around hoping that submission will eventually be rewarded with appreciation. They observe patterns, and when those patterns consistently disrespect their values, they leave calmly, without needing revenge or drama. Women test boundaries, not always intentionally, but it happens, sometimes consciously, sometimes as a subconscious way of measuring emotional strength. And the test isn't about whether you fight back or get angry. It's about whether you remain grounded when pressure is applied. A man who collapses emotionally every time something doesn't go his way fails that test. He shows that his stability depends entirely on external circumstances staying comfortable. But a man who stays calm, who doesn't beg for reassurance, who doesn't panic when ignored, he passes without saying a word. His composure becomes the answer. And that answer builds attraction because it proves emotional maturity. One of the biggest mistakes you can make is becoming emotionally dependent on one person's approval. When your entire mood rises and falls based on how she's treating you that day, you've lost control of yourself. You wake up checking your phone for validation. You overthink every word in her messages. You feel anxious when she's distant and euphoric when she's attentive. That emotional roller coaster might feel intense, but it's not love, it's addiction. And addiction makes you weak because your sense of worth is now in someone else's hands. Women feel that dependency and it changes how they see you. Instead of a strong presence they admire, you become a source of pressure because they know their behavior controls your entire emotional state. Controlling your emotions doesn't mean pretending you don't feel anything. It means you feel everything, but you're not enslaved by those feelings. You experience disappointment without begging. You feel hurt without lashing out. You notice disrespect without becoming bitter. You process rejection without losing your sense of identity. That level of emotional discipline is powerful because most people never develop it. They're controlled by whatever they feel in the moment, which makes them reactive, unpredictable, and exhausting. But when you can sit with discomfort without immediately trying to escape it, you develop a kind of inner strength that radiates outward without effort. Let's talk about purpose for a second. This is where a lot of guys go completely off track. When you don't have something meaningful pulling your focus forward, relationships become your entire world. Every text feels like life or death. Every small conflict feels catastrophic. Every rejection feels like total failure. Because without purpose, you have nothing else grounding your identity. You're not building anything. You're not growing toward a vision. You're just emotionally available, waiting for someone to give your life meaning. And that energy is suffocating. Women notice when a man has direction, when his life doesn't revolve around constant emotional stimulation, when he wakes up with goals that go beyond seeking approval. That focus creates natural confidence because his worth isn't tied entirely to whether someone chooses him today. A man with purpose moves through relationships differently. He values connection, but he doesn't abandon himself to maintain it. He still trains. He still works on his goals. He still protects his time. He doesn't drop everything the moment someone shows interest because his life already has structure. This isn't about being cold or unavailable. It's about balance. It's about understanding that losing yourself inside a relationship doesn't make you a better partner. It makes you a weaker man. And weak men, no matter how nice or devoted, rarely keep a woman's respect long term because strength is foundational to attraction. Purpose also changes how you handle heartbreak. When a relationship ends and you've been building something meaningful outside of it, you don't collapse. You feel pain, sure. You might grieve the loss, but your identity remains intact because it was never entirely wrapped up in one person. Compare that to the guy who sacrificed his goals, his friendships, his routines, everything, just to focus on a relationship. When that ends, he's left with nothing. No direction, no structure, no sense of self. That's why purpose matters. It gives you emotional stability that can't be easily destroyed by another person's decision to leave. Now, here's the part that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. You have to be willing to walk away. Not as a manipulation tactic, not as a threat, but as a genuine boundary. If you're not willing to leave when your peace is constantly disrespected, you're communicating that your standards are negotiable. And negotiable standards aren't real standards. They're just suggestions you hope people follow. Walking away is hard because it forces you to confront fear. Fear of being replaced. Fear of starting over. Fear of loneliness. Fear that maybe you won't find someone better. But staying in a situation that slowly destroys your confidence because you're afraid to face those fears is even more damaging long term. The ability to leave calmly is one of the most attractive qualities a man can possess, not because women want to be abandoned, but because it shows you're not emotionally desperate. It shows you value your peace more than temporary comfort. It shows you understand your worth even when someone else fails to recognize it. Most guys will tolerate almost anything to avoid being alone. They'll accept lies, manipulation, inconsistency, disrespect, all because the fear of loneliness is greater than the pain of staying. But emotionally mature men understand that being alone is temporary. Losing your self-respect can affect you for years. Here's what happens when you develop this mindset. People start treating you differently without you saying a word. Your energy changes, you stop chasing, you stop over-explaining, you stop seeking constant validation. You become selective about where you invest your time and emotion. And that selectivity creates value because people recognize when someone isn't easily accessible. Not because you're playing hard to get, but because your life genuinely contains priorities that matter more than keeping everyone happy. Self-respect is the foundation of everything we've talked about. Without it, nothing else works. You can have purpose, emotional control, and clear standards, but if you don't genuinely respect yourself, you'll abandon all of it the moment you feel afraid of losing someone. Self-respect means you don't beg for loyalty. You don't convince people to see your value. You don't tolerate repeated disrespect hoping it will eventually stop. You observe behavior, and when that behavior consistently violates your peace, you create distance without needing drama or revenge. People will treat you exactly how you allow them to treat you. If you accept dishonesty once without consequence, you'll likely see it again. If you tolerate disrespect without addressing it, it becomes the norm. If you keep giving chances to someone who continuously hurts you, they learn that your boundaries mean nothing. This isn't about being harsh or unforgiving. It's about understanding that healthy relationships require mutual respect. And mutual respect cannot exist when one person keeps sacrificing their dignity to maintain connection. The strongest relationships aren't built on one person endlessly compromising while the other does whatever they want. They're built on two people who respect themselves enough to maintain standards while still caring deeply for each other. A man who respects himself doesn't need to control or dominate anyone. He simply refuses to betray his own values for temporary acceptance. He doesn't pretend to be someone else to gain approval. He doesn't chase people who clearly don't value him. His actions are rooted in internal stability, not fear. This is what separates emotionally mature men from everyone else. Mature men understand that relationships should enhance life, not become the entire reason for living. They know that losing someone, painful as it might be, isn't the end of their story. They've built a foundation strong enough to withstand rejection, heartbreak, and disappointment because their identity isn't completely dependent on external validation. And that foundation creates a presence that naturally attracts respect without needing to demand it. So where does this leave you? It leaves you with a choice. You can keep bending yourself into shapes, hoping someone will finally appreciate the effort. You can keep abandoning your standards because you're terrified of being alone. You can keep tolerating behavior that slowly destroys your confidence. Or you can decide right now that your peace matters more than keeping everyone comfortable. You can start enforcing boundaries calmly and consistently. You can build a life with purpose that doesn't crumble when one person leaves. You can develop the emotional strength to walk away from what no longer serves you. None of this is easy. It requires facing fears you've probably been avoiding for years. It requires accepting that some people won't like the version of you that has standards. It requires trusting that your value doesn't disappear just because someone fails to recognize it. But the alternative is spending your life seeking approval from people who will never truly respect you because you've taught them they don't have to. And that's a far worse outcome than temporary loneliness. The men who earn lasting respect aren't perfect. They're not immune to pain or rejection, but they've made a decision that their dignity is non-negotiable. And that decision changes everything about how they move through the world. It changes how they speak, how they react, how they choose who gets access to their time and energy. It creates a quiet confidence that doesn't need to announce itself because it's felt in every interaction. And that confidence, built on self-respect, purpose, and emotional strength, is what creates the kind of attraction that lasts long after attention fades.